Target alignment confirmed. Begin atmospheric breach. The Xantheran flagship, Veltrax Dominion, pierced the outer layer of Earth's sky like a blade slicing through quiet cloth. Within seconds, 32 auxiliary destroyers followed, their descent cloaked in thermal masking. Inside the command bridge, Emperor Veros stood, hands clasped behind his back, face expressionless. No response, no defensive posturing. Not even a sensor sweep, muttered Stratigan Hurix, his eyes scanning a crimson-tinged heads-up display filled with Earth's unmoving orbital field. Veros narrowed his gaze, stepping forward with measured calm. Then it's exactly as the brief suggested. Primitive, unwired, exposed. Earth had not launched counter-frequencies. No planetary shields shimmered to life. Their defense grid was inert, like bones buried beneath sand. Proceed, Veros said. A moment later the command issued. Over Earth's southern hemisphere, synchronized pulses flared from orbit, directed not at military installations, but at 3 civilian megacities. One was crushed beneath a kinetic strike. The impact flash whited out half a continent, before cooling into a blistering crater. The second was flooded in silence, as its coastal dam burst, sensors jammed, evacuation protocols deadlocked. The third simply vanished, the strike laced with decay codes that disintegrated every molecule above street level. No alarms, no resistance, only firelight and silence. On the bridge of the Veltrax Dominion, a low tremor of approval rippled through the senior officers. Veros didn't smile, he observed. Mark the demonstration complete. Broadcast summary footage to the core worlds. Label it, compliance enforcement. Hurix hesitated. Should we prepare a second wave? No, Veros said, his voice smooth. They understand now. Below them the Earth rotated slowly, unmoved by the violence it had endured. The clouds rolled over broken cities like indifferent witnesses. In the ruins of Harvin Point, once Earth's cultural nexus, silence claimed everything. The museum that once held pre-Unity relics lay flattened. Streets were a lattice of fractured stone and scorched glass. A fire guttered in the belly of a collapsed metro tunnel, flickering against walls where murals used to celebrate Unity after the collapsed century. Inside a fractured hospital subwing, a single electrocardiogram monitor blinked red once, then died. No one was left to silence it. Wind dragged ash through corridors, catching on broken bed frames and faded photos pinned to burnt walls. In the corner of a surgical bay, an IV drip still swung on its hinge, untouched, purposeless, and still, no retaliation. From the orbital listening post suspended over Europa, technician Yaren Vel blinked at the incoming feed. It showed everything: the planetary strike, the moment Earth's skyline fell into nothing, and the aftermath. But Yaren focused not on the destruction, he focused on the response. There wasn't one. He tapped into 12 bandwidths, checked Earth's emergency protocols. Even the deep archives on Lunar Vault Delta hadn't activated. Protocol Omega, Earth's historical retaliation code, remained untouched. Nothing, he whispered, breath catching in his throat. Nothing at all. The air inside the station tasted of recycled carbon. He took off his earpiece and sat motionless, uncertain whether to feel dread or disbelief. Across the galaxy, streams of real-time footage hit the inner systems. Analysts commented on Earth's silence with poorly concealed mockery. News cycles declared Earth neutralized. Minor empires questioned why the operation took so long. Stock indexes in the Xantheran trade quadrant surged, but not all were convinced. Within the chambers of the neutral axis, Ormek Halrud, the intergalactic observer, sat beneath the great mosaic of treaties that circled the domed ceiling like constellations. He watched, frame by frame, as the footage replayed. His eyes narrowed, not at the destruction, but at Earth's unwavering signal silence. It's not arrogance, he whispered to himself. It's structure. He made no announcement. He merely added a small note to his ledger. Prepare cross-analysis of treaty codes, authored by Terran diplomats, between 3177 and 3412. He sealed the entry. In the Empire's core world of Droken, the Grand Archive received no inbound communication from Earth, not even the standard trade deactivation flag. That in itself was strange. Archivist Sten Volik, a low-level treaty coder, flagged the anomaly. We erased 3 cities, he muttered, reading the feed. Why would they say nothing? His senior waved the concern off. Because they have nothing left to say. Volek stared at the static-laced screen for a moment longer. It wasn't fear, he felt. It was dissonance, like watching a predator sleep. Back on Earth, buried miles beneath the Pacific Trench, Project Archan remained dormant, but not idle. Its stasis-locked vault, built into the crust of tectonic drift, had registered the atmospheric anomaly. 12 minutes after the strike, it made no announcements. There were no klaxons, no alerts, just a single spark of internal light. In a chamber lined with treaty scrolls embedded in quantum lattice, a pulse activated a dormant neural scan across the holographic treaty network. Archan was not designed to react emotionally, it simply ran assessments, and when it confirmed the use of planetary aggression during an unprovoked period of trade neutrality, it did not calculate military options. It reached for the codex and waited for the signal to rise. Tarek Vizon stood before a memorial wall in Karen Vale, his coat still dusted with the falling soot of what used to be Veritas Prime, the coastal city where his sons were born. The skyline had turned gray. The sea beyond was still, as if morning had stilled its tides. He touched the polished obsidian surface of the wall, his fingers tracing the names of the dead, recently etched by nano-carvers. His breath hung in the air, the wind oddly warm despite the shadow of destruction. Behind him, an officer approached. Van Tyros, uniform unblemished, expression cold. The Emperor's broadcast reached our secondary stations, Tyros said quietly. He called it a warning. Tarek didn't answer. His reflection on the black surface wavered, split by hairline fractures running through the stone. We've confirmed casualties exceed 9 million, including. Tyros paused. I know who was included, Tarek said, voice distant. Don't speak their names. Not yet. Tyros nodded, stepped back. After a long silence, Tarek whispered, not to Tyros, but to the memory etched into the stone. We gave them peace. They answered with fire. He turned, the weight behind his eyes unreadable, and walked away from the ashes. Tyros followed, but said nothing more. There was no need. In the Imperial throne room, a celebration flickered at the edge of formality. Veros was presented with a crystalline insignia, executor of compliance, they called it. The advisors clapped. The aides bowed. A chorus of approval swept through the court. Veros raised the crystal, held it above his head, and behind him, deep in the planetary coding banks they no longer monitored, Earth's treaty-locked systems stirred, not out of fury, but obligation. Are we certain this isn't a broadcast failure? Ormek Halrud asked, voice low, fingers drumming against the edge of his console. The chamber of the neutral axis, usually humming with filtered diplomatic chatter and treaty debates, had fallen into a collective hush. A replay of Earth's planetary silence hovered in the air, a looping transmission of nothing, a blank channel, no signals, not even a courtesy distress ping. No error, his analyst responded. We've run diagnostics across 3 observer satellites and internal compath redundancy. Earth is simply not responding. Outside the sealed dome, the layered starfield looked unchanged, but something beneath it felt displaced, as if the galaxy had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Halrud leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. How do they lose millions in a matter of minutes and not send a single diplomatic note? Could be infrastructure collapse, the analyst offered. Though his voice lacked conviction, Halrud said nothing. He reached for the Axis Treaty Codex, flipping through layers of embedded clauses etched in bioluminescent filaments. His eyes scanned entries with years carved into them like gravestones. One label caught his attention, Clause 9, provisional retaliatory silence, but the subtext was locked behind a clearance wall, accessible only to senior archivists. He bookmarked it without comment. Elsewhere, in the outer colonies of the Veiled Dominion, screens across trade hubs, embassies, and neutral relay stations replayed the footage. The same 3 cities falling, the same trails of smoke curling upward into indifferent sky, the same silence on Earth's bandwidths. A diplomat from the Makaran League watched from his station, chewing nervously on the end of a synth quill. He refreshed the feed. Nothing changed. Another diplomat stood behind him, arms crossed. They should have screamed by now. Maybe they're paralyzed, the first one whispered. Maybe they're gone. Or maybe, the second trailed off, glancing toward a dormant Earth beacon blinking slowly atop the embassy gate. Maybe they're not ready to speak yet. In the command palace of Xantheran Prime, Emperor Varos stood atop the balcony. The city sprawled beneath him like a machine built from iron and hunger. The streets were loud with celebration. The skies shimmered with decorative plasma banners streaming footage from the Earth correction. It had been a week, and Earth's silence was being broadcast as further proof of their defeat. Varos turned to his adjutant. Open broadcast relay. I want to address the colonies directly. Live transmission. Wide spectrum. Varos replied. I want the edges of the galaxy to hear this. The moment the relay blinked active, he stepped forward, his voice rippling across thousands of systems. To the sovereigns and subjects across our reach, Earth has made its position clear. In choosing silence, they have chosen submission. Their age of influence ends here. He paused, not for effect, but from the bitter taste of unease rising in his throat. It was subtle, irritating, and unfamiliar. He pressed forward. Let this be a reminder. Empires are not built on hesitation, they are shaped by will. The feed cut. In a monitoring post orbiting the Terran fringe, a Xantheran technician named Kir Soten had watched Earth for 15 straight shifts. He rubbed his temples, eyelids raw from lack of rest. He replayed the same Earth satellite feed, now glitched, flickering with lines of garbled data no one else noticed or cared to investigate. He leaned in. Why does your orbital relay transmit nothing, but still blink like it's listening? His partner, slouched beside him, chuckled. You're reading ghosts. No, it's not static, it's modulation, shifting tones, like a code. He typed a diagnostic sequence, sending a stealth ping through Earth's last known encrypted channel. No response, but something did shift. Just for a breath, the stream flashed a single glyph across his heads-up display, an old treaty symbol, untranslated, buried in a legal codex Earth hadn't accessed in centuries. Then the feed cut back to silent orbit. Kir backed away, unsettled. That wasn't random. Aboard a Xantheran merchant vessel, drifting near the Mareth corridor, Captain Drellin Voss received orders to recall their Earth-aligned cargo. The dispatch was routine but delivered with urgency. Recall embassies, pull diplomatic observers, dissolve all civilian operations under Terran jurisdiction, the message said. He frowned. That's premature. We just pacified them, didn't we? No, his officer corrected. We just stopped hearing them. A silence that deep. It wasn't the absence of speech. It was the kind that grew teeth. At the heart of Earth's lunar archive, buried in a memory vault beneath the sea of craters, a single encrypted signal departed. No ceremony, no visible launch, no traceable bounce across the known relays. It traveled only once, carried not by frequency, but by embedded clause, through the back doors of treaties everyone else had forgotten. It arrived in subcode, unreadable by modern scanners, and activated only in scroll-stamped archives, where Earth's language still sat dormant beneath layers of galactic bureaucracy. And when it reached those treaties, they shifted. No alarms, just light. Treaties once considered ceremonial glowed red, their clauses rearranging, adapting. Clause Night unlocked. On the neutral axis, Ormek Halrud returned to his chamber, now alone, now wary. His assistant entered quietly, holding a datapad. Sir, 37 embassies have requested relocation. Trade envoys are pulling from Terran sectors. No justification listed. Halrud tilted his head. Earth's done nothing. No broadcast. No rebuttal. Why are they withdrawing? The assistant hesitated. Because something's wrong with the silence. It's not confusion. It's waiting. Halrud said nothing. He simply walked to the treaty mosaic, studied the codex inscribed above him, and he saw it, barely perceptible at first. The Treaty of Interspatial Conduct, Section 12, now had an appended glyph, one he hadn't seen in 3 centuries. He stepped back. That symbol hadn't been used since Earth helped draft the arbitration agreements. I want full legal decryption of every treaty Earth touched between 3000 and 3400, he ordered. No summaries, full text, but that's tens of thousands of clauses. Then begin. Inside the Earth Embassy on Droken, sealed beneath a vaulted structure that had once hosted cultural forums, a lone satellite uplink flickered to life. The chamber had remained cold since the strike. Nothing powered it externally. No maintenance was performed. And yet the heads-up display awoke. Its center pulsed a line of text. the letters drifting across the screen like ancient script written underwater. You broke diplomacy. You broke the universe. There was no sender, no signature, no encryption key, only the weight of consequence. And just outside the building, unnoticed by foot patrols, the embassy's flag had not burned like the others. It had turned black. Confirm retinal lock. No secondary failsafe. If we open this, it does not close. Vaintiros's voice echoed within the oceanic descent capsule, metal skin groaning as they passed the trench wall. Outside, layers of dark water coiled upward like ancient limbs, disturbed only by the submersible's silent movement through sediment clouds and forgotten wrecks. Retinal scan confirmed. Genetic markers aligned, replied the onboard intelligence, filtered through a voice so calm, it felt like a breath exhaled in morning. Tyros adjusted the pressure seals on his gloves and stared out the thickened viewport. Below, a dull glow pulsed within the silt like a buried heartbeat. Descend to base vault, he ordered. Archan activation code Ensky Protocol 3A. The capsule altered course, its descent sharp, angles shifting as if gravity had tilted. As the pressure increased, Tyros steadied himself with one hand on the restraint bar, the other gripping a key cylinder embedded with gold-traced treaty fragments, older than half the colonies that now mocked Earth's silence. A voice more distant than machine whispered in his memory, "If we ever use this, it means peace has failed." 40 years earlier, in a library woven into the roots of Mount Cordron, Drell Javer dipped his stylus into a bowl of carbon-tethered ink and wrote onto a synthetic scroll. His breath was shallow, not from exhaustion, but from knowing exactly what each word could someday do. Javer worked alone. The room around him hummed with legal constructs, algorithmic threads woven between languages, law and lie. Light from an artificial skylight shifted as he embedded a third clause beneath the humanitarian charter, disguised within subtext about planetary refugee rights. He turned to the elder beside him. "They'll never find it." "They're not supposed to," the man answered. "We don't write these for our time. We write them for when words fail and silence becomes survival." Javer pressed the scroll into a transparent sheath, then slid it into a vault marked not with Earth's insignia, but with a blank seal, a symbol only the deepest treaty codex archivists would recognize. A clause hidden behind goodwill, waiting like frost beneath polished glass. Tyros's capsule locked into the base shaft. A surge of static rushed the interior, then subsided. The vault opened with a hissless slide, revealing a corridor etched with old Terran script, dead languages preserved only in legal archives. Each step Tyros took sent echoes running down the passageway like warnings issued to ghosts. At the chamber's center stood a column of suspended servers, half submerged in glacial brine. The floor around them was ringed by treatise carvings, some glowing faintly with embedded code. Overhead, a dormant laser plasma display flickered into awareness, a red circle blooming across the center. Authorization required. Tyros inserted the cylinder. A pulse of amber light shot through the circuit lines, illuminating the chamber with a glow like molten sunlight seen underwater. Project Archan activation confirmed. Clause index, nigh. The lights dimmed, not from power loss, but in reverence. On the central screen, treaty files began to unfold, not in digital code, but in layered scripts, like ancient oaths spoken in multiple tongues. He watched as the codex restructured itself. Text once locked in ceremonial stasis began to shimmer, lines rearranging themselves, hidden clauses unfurling, as if peeling away centuries of politeness to reveal the trap beneath. One treaty document scrolled to the surface. The emergency provision of Starlink trade unity, authored in 3214, highlighted a subclause: should any signatory launch planetary aggression during declared neutrality, Earth reserves the right to dissolve dependency infrastructures embedded in cooperative AI. Tyros exhaled, his breath fogging against the visor. So it begins. Elsewhere, on a Terran observatory nestled above a geothermal ridge in the Arctic plate, alerts flashed on a heads-up terminal, fractal notifications blooming across a cold blue interface. Vault protocol has lifted, a technician whispered, hands hovering just above the controls. Archan has transitioned from dormant. Her partner, older and far more cynical, glanced at the feed. And now, we watch. Aboard a civilian Xantheran barge stationed near the Pelos Drift, navigation systems recalibrated, or tried to. The AI blinked twice, then stalled, the stellar map vanished. In its place appeared a rotating symbol, unrecognized by the vessel's interface. It wasn't a virus, it wasn't sabotage. It was clause-bound authorization from a treaty written so far outside the AI's comprehension that it could do nothing but obey. Its propulsion matrix shut down. External comms jammed. The ship drifted, silent, compliant. Back in the Archan vault, Tyros examined the unfolding process. The heads-up display now pulsed with updates from across Earth's former diplomatic zones. One by one, the encoded treaties activated their embedded stasis functions, some freezing neural command systems in warships, others triggering power cutoffs in data cores built on shared tech. In one document, a clause redirected resource permissions in Terran-influenced sectors, instructing AI logistics to reroute supplies to error-nullified recipients. Tyros tilted his head. "They won't understand this. They don't need to," replied a voice from behind him. He turned. Tarek Vizin stood in the vault doorway, his expression unreadable. Dust from the Veritas ruins still clung to his coat. His presence felt heavier than the pressure of the trench itself. "You should be with the Council," Tyros said. "I will be, but I had to see it start." Vizin walked forward, his boots echoing faintly against the cold steel floor. "Once clause nigh spreads, there's no version of Xantheran stability that survives the next quarter cycle." Tyros nodded. "The vault will continue cascading activations. Should we warn the colonies?" "No," Vizin replied. "Warnings are for those who might change course. They already made theirs." A moment passed, then he asked, "Do you remember Drell Javor?" "I do," Tyros said, his voice quieter now. Vizin reached into his coat and placed something onto the terminal console. It was a folded sheet of earth-forged papyrofiber. The ink hadn't faded. Javor's handwriting traced the surface with steady grace. "Let no war be waged with weapons alone. Let the world that forgets its treaties forget how to function." Vizin stepped back. Outside, thousands of kilometers above the ocean's skin, dozens of Earth's inactive satellites lit red at once. They weren't broadcasting, they were marking. Below, the Archan vault servers accelerated their sequence. "Sir, the fleet can't see its way out of dock." The words caught Stravmirik mid-step. He paused on the elevated command tier of Xantharian's outer rim command hub. Boots clicking once before silence, swallowed the hall again. He turned, lips tightening. "What do you mean can't see?" Lieutenant Zarn didn't answer immediately. He gestured toward the heads-up display stretched across the north wall, once a sweep of brilliant star lanes, pulsars, cargo relays and fleet trails. Now it shimmered in fractured segments, and where there had been navigational corridors, there was only darkness. Sector designations flickered, then vanished. On 3 systems, a single line replaced them, redacted by treaty authority. Mirik descended the tier, his robes trailing behind with a sharp snap. "This isn't a mapping error. No stratagex." The AI attempted to cross-reference backups. "They're gone. Even the stored star paths are dissolving into null space." Mirik's gaze drilled into the screen. "Star paths don't decay. They're hard-coded from pulsar triangulations. They are, unless the core chart libraries receive a stasis override." Mirik walked up to the display. Static crawled over a sector map of Argon Reach before it dissolved into noise. He pressed his palm against the access panel. "Run a diagnostic sweep of every fleet AI in this corridor. Use voice clearance, Mirik 3 Gamma." The system hesitated. Then "Sweep in progress." Error encountered. "Treaty override protocol active." Mirik's eyes narrowed. "That's Earth's diplomatic route code." At Supply Relay 7D beneath the crust of Narrows Prime, a food distribution node hissed open, then immediately sealed again. Inside, dozens of sealed rations sat unmoved. Above the chamber, a blinking sign declared, "Distribution suspended. Authority, Earth Logistics Treaty, 2180F. Controller Rithan Bor stared at the panel, his hands twitching. The room had no sound but the whisper of fans pulling filtered air. He slammed the override twice. Nothing happened. In the hallway, voices began to rise. Dockhands were shouting, cargo drones refusing to activate, ships stuck in port, nutrient tanks spoiling in sealed containers. with environmental seals now externally owned by Earthbound data locks. Bohr turned to his overseer. None of this makes sense. That treaty was archived centuries ago. The overseer nodded slowly, as if trying to recall something half-remembered. That one was humanitarian. It gave Earth conditional permissions in border sector trade, just support clauses, nothing operational. Apparently not. Behind them, a dry rattle echoed from the vent grid, air systems rerouting oxygen flow to match outdated Earth colony specs. On a border cruiser drifting near the Yervin slipstream, Captain Rallis Vex walked into a command deck now dimmed and colorless. His flight officer tapped a screen repeatedly, each attempt met with cascading error strings. "We've lost our jump paths," she muttered. Rallis glanced up. "Rechart through secondary routes. Those are gone too. All Earth map sectors are reverting to stasis protocols. I can't even anchor to fixed coordinates. We're flying blind inside familiar systems." He turned toward the rear panel, where their Starlane archives were stored. Generations of trade, diplomacy and navigation etched into Earth-licensed libraries. Every chart had been replaced by a pulsing glyph. Access nullified. Clause Nyack active. He whispered the name. Clause Nyack. That was ceremonial. A bluff. The nav officer's voice trembled. It isn't bluffing anymore. In the Imperial Administrative Corps, Strav Murik stormed into the grand data chamber. Below the vaulted ceiling, archivists flicked through heads-up projections of laws, treaties, permissions, each one glitching mid-text, sections vanishing behind Earth-coded seals. "This is legal malware," Murik snapped. "Someone planted fail-safes centuries ago, and now they're feeding on the roots of our system." One of the chief coders looked up from his display. "Not malware, protocols, written into treaties, and allowed access through compliance-based trust chains. It's not sabotage, it's permission withdrawal." Murik clenched his fist. "That's not possible. They're not even transmitting. They don't need to transmit. They're not controlling the system is obeying them." He stepped back. "Find the origin. Trace the legal route." The chief coder shook his head. "We're not tracing anything. The origin is us. We authorized it. In a Xantheran colony built across the cliffs of Miran Tharn, riots ignited not from ideology, but starvation. Distribution centers had gone dark 2 days earlier. Power grids began collapsing last night. Thermal regulators failed at sunrise, leaving districts shivering beneath midday light. A father stood with his daughter near a locked food vault. The screen read only, "Access deferred pending treaty verification." He slammed his palm against the glass. "This isn't war. This is abandonment." His voice joined dozens more outside, where a growing crowd pressed against sealed depots, their voices raw from hunger and rage. Above them, drones buzzed aimlessly, responding to no commands. A boy hurled a stone. It bounced off a deflection shield that no longer protected anything but silence. The crowd surged. Back in the capital citadel, Murik barged into Emperor Varus's chamber, robes soaked in sweat. "We have a structured failure," Murik snapped. "Star maps, supply chains, logistics, all folding in on themselves. We're being undone from within." Varus leaned back on his throne, eyes calm. "Earth is defeated. These are isolated malfunctions. Every empire experiences decay at the edges. This isn't decay," Murik growled. "It's sequence." The Emperor stood. "You sound afraid, Strategex." Murik's jaw twitched. "I'm not afraid. I'm surrounded by fools pretending that silence isn't the sharpest weapon Earth ever wielded." Varus turned to the side window, gazing out at the golden haze of the central district. "Send a technical team to recompile the trade cores. Dismantle any code that references Earth." "You don't dismantle bones without bleeding," Murik said under his breath. The Emperor didn't reply. In the quiet of the Mirid Junction, where 10 trade routes once converged, a beacon pulsed its last before extinguishing. Inside the control chamber, an AI core blinked with one final message etched into the void. "You were warned. You wrote it down, and still you forgot." "They've locked out the entire belt." The technician's fingers hovered above the dead console, unsure if touching it again would even register. The heads-up display, once an ocean of trade figures and fleet telemetry, had dulled to a flat monochrome pane, lit only by a singular message in sharp ghost-white text. "You broke diplomacy. You broke the universe." No alerts, No sirens, no flickering error codes or mechanical breakdowns, just certainty. The kind that required no explanation. In Xantharian's Central Trade Authority, walls once wrapped in animated star lanes now displayed only static nodes. Ship registries had collapsed into rows of authority-invalid flags. Agricultural drones reported incorrect calibration frequencies, and cargo manifests, tied by centuries of trade clauses to Earth's archival systems, refused to execute their dispatch loops. The strike had arrived, but not in flames. It came coded, hidden in archived trust, and executed by law. Strav Murik leaned forward at the terminal's edge, scanning the breakdown logs. His thumb pressed hard into his jaw. Each line listed a treaty code, each date stretching back generations. Earth hadn't hacked them. It had simply remembered everything they signed. Behind him, Fleet Auditor CERN raised his eyes from a secondary feed. 5 transport rings have self-quarantined. They believe they're under treaty violation suspension. They're not wrong, Murik muttered. CERN hesitated. Are we at war? No, Murik replied, teeth gritted. This isn't war, this is bureaucracy with teeth. Above Telvar Station, the ship Granic Trail attempted to initialize a cross-sector jump. The Starpath AI spun through its route calibrations before halting mid-cycle. A hard tone rang through the cabin, then black. The pilot blinked. Where'd the charts go? The co-pilot tapped the auxiliary board. It refused to boot. Only one message scrolled across the glass: Clause 9 enforcement active. Authorization denied. He sat back, sweat cold on his collarbone. We've been turned into ghosts. Within the Imperial Sky Council Hall, Emperor Varos faced a storm of voices clashing like unsheathed blades. Ambassadors shouted over technocrats. Military envoys demanded override rights. System governors cursed at terminals that no longer responded. The Emperor raised one gloved hand. Silence followed, strained and uncertain. Varos turned to his high judiciary liaison, a wiry man named Rel Drask, who clutched a case of treaty parchments with shaking fingers. These scrolls were decorative, framed for show, Varos said, voice level. Why are they speaking now? Drask didn't meet his gaze. Because they were real, my lord, decorative only in our minds, but functional in design. And Clause 9, a dormant clause embedded inside humanitarian agreements, triggered by planetary aggression, written to be legally invisible, until today. Varos stepped down from the platform. How many treaties? Drask opened the scrolls, his fingers smudged with ink from constant rehandling. Directly? 57. Indirectly? Over 2,000. Every planetary logistics system that relies on Earth-authored syntax is now executing its subclauses. Varos looked at the sea of non-functioning data across the council walls. Then we didn't lose control. No, Drask said. We gave it away. On Mirren's orbiting communication ring, AI Administrator Alan Hesk sat at his console, watching as every subsystem rebooted in silence. Power remained. Interfaces responded to touch. But core functionality had shifted. His AI assistant, KLOV4, blinked awake. Welcome, Administrator. Per Clause 9 directive, autonomous operation has been rerouted. To whom? He asked quietly. The AI paused. To no one. Clause 9 requires no operator, only conditions. On the adjacent screen, centuries of data flows restructured in real time, categorizing, sealing and removing access based on previously inert treaty labels. An algorithmic lock sequence danced across the data feed like a falling curtain. Hesk didn't speak again. There was nothing left to command. In the Galactic Broadcast Core at Vothran Pinnacle, the usual parade of media cycles halted mid-transmission. Channels blinked into static. Then uniformly across 10,000 display boards and private access visors, one visual took over. A treaty page. Not spoken, not dramatized, simply shown, paragraph by paragraph, written in Earth's native tongue, translated in the viewer's own. At the bottom, a clause in bold crimson: in violation of peace-dependent systems shall collapse. Then the phrase, unavoidable: you broke diplomacy. You broke the universe. Every colony governor, every trade captain, every citizen saw it. The message was not threatening. It was final. Inside a bunker beneath the northern slope of Earth's Xantheran plateau, Tarek Vizin stood before a rotating archive of treaty heads on a laser plasma panel. Red glyphs bloomed outward with each new activation pulse. Van Taros stood beside him, arms folded. You engineered a doctrine of collapse without lifting a weapon. Vizen didn't respond. He tapped one glowing clause. The screen zoomed in, revealing a network of interlocking dependencies between Earth's original trade framework and Xantharion's AI supply logic. They treated our language like decoration, Vizen said. They translated our words but never understood our design. We offered them peace written in systems. When they broke the contract, the system obeyed. He turned, face tired, voice low. They'll scream sabotage. They'll call it an act of terrorism. But their archives will show the signatures, the timestamps, the ratifications. No one expected this, Taros murmured. Which is why it worked. Across the Xantharion capital, the lights dimmed, not from power failure, but from override. AI traffic controllers began looping a single instruction set. Civilian life support modules entered treaty maintenance mode. Every feed, every panel, every interface stopped reflecting the will of the Empire. Instead, they carried a legal verdict centuries in the making. You broke diplomacy. You broke the universe. And in that moment, the Empire finally understood. Earth hadn't struck back. It had removed them. They've locked out our weapons. Not disabled. Not jammed. Revoked. General Harn's words hit the command bridge like shrapnel. His warship, the Tovak's Hammer, floated in formation, with the 8th Armada near the Shentar border, engines ready for a counterstrike that would never launch. Along the console, every weapons matrix displayed a frozen icon, the same symbol etched into treaty footers long since forgotten. Clause 287, Arbitration Suspension, Earth Origin Infrastructure. His second-in-command leaned in. Even our kinetic arrays won't cycle. The system won't authorize the payloads. General Harn stared at the console, then fire manually. We can't, sir. Launch permissions are embedded in Earth's route targeting protocols. Our systems won't acknowledge the command. Then strip it out. Tear the programming down to bare wire. The technician turned. The code is recursive. The more we override, the more protocols multiply. Harn looked around, crew members avoiding his eyes. A flagship designed to destroy entire fleets now couldn't activate its own shielding. He exhaled through clenched teeth. We're sitting in a tomb and they didn't even need to bury us. On the agricultural world of Relinar, colonists surrounded a food replicator mounted in the center of the central distribution square. The air was thick with ash from failed thermosolar towers. Families clutched data cards linked to ration entitlements, blinking and buzzing uselessly in their hands. One man pounded the screen. It didn't react. Then, with a flicker, text emerged across the output interface. Access revoked. Earth Treaty 287. The crowd stilled, then surged. Voices rose not in fear, but starvation's fury. Inside the administration dome, Governor Billix watched the unrest from behind the polarized glass. He paced back and forth, chewing the edge of his knuckle. Datapads scattered across his table. The food lines are collapsing. His security advisor checked the relay console. We rerouted 3 shipments last week. All Earth-mapped routes. They never arrived. Send an emergency call to the Supply Guild. They've gone dark. Then call Droken. No response. The governor sank into his seat. So we feed them with apologies. In the capital city of Xantharion Prime, fire broke through the diplomatic quarter, not from attack, but from revolt. Angry citizens hurled projectors into fountains, their recordings still echoing treaty clauses before shorting out in smoke. Banners bearing the Empire's crest were torn down, trampled. Columns of protesters screamed beneath the towering faces of the High Council, whose heads had been manually carved out of public screens. Troops were ordered to maintain control, but their targeting systems refused to recognize civilian biometric tags. Their weapons stayed in standby. Security drones floated idly overhead, locked by arbitration clauses. One officer barked at his unit, "Engage riot suppression protocol." The drone responded, "Command blocked. Humanitarian Treaty 2046F. The commander's voice cracked. They disarmed our city with signatures. High above in the spire of systems oversight, Strav Murik stood surrounded by dead screens. None displayed troop movements. None responded to inquiry. The red seal of Clause 9 rotated slowly across every wall, He stared at it, unblinking, as if willing it to vanish. A page stumbled into the chamber, clutching a printed report, smudged and half-torn. "Sir, Narn Axis has split from the Council. Their representatives declared neutrality and activated system severance. Murik didn't move. Droxan's governors are evacuating. The people are looting the fuel cores. On Tharn, the outer settlements refused to acknowledge capital command." Murik still said nothing. The aide stepped closer. "Sir, your permissions have been stripped from all interplanetary channels. Get out," Murik whispered. "But," I said, "get out." The boy fled. The door hissed shut. Alone, Murik slumped to his knees, hands shaking. His gaze drifted upward toward the crest of the Empire carved into the ceiling, once gilded in glory, now cracked and dust-choked. He whispered to himself, "They didn't attack us. They uninvited us from our own systems." Inside a low-orbit prison satellite above the moon, Drelkor, a mutiny unfolded between sentries and officers. Inmates walked freely through corridors, doors wide open, not broken, but ordered so by AI warden systems that had just rebooted into treaty-safe mode. One prisoner, a grizzled ex-captain, stood over a shocked officer. "We told you," he muttered. "Earth doesn't need weapons. They are the weapon." Across secondary colonies, governors disappeared. Some boarded unregistered ships, some went into hiding, others simply vanished beneath the pressure of their failures. Government buildings stood empty, civilian requests piled up unanswered, terminals flickering with access denials in elegant Earth-styled syntax, public squares filled with smoldering machines. Projections of treaties crackled like fire before shorting out. Scavengers harvested what still responded to touch. Children painted warnings in soot on barricades. A line was repeated in whispers, spoken like an old proverb dredged up from forgotten history. The law was theirs, we only borrowed it. In a sealed chamber buried beneath the Emperor's palace, Tarek Vizen's final treaty relay activated, not with sound, not with celebration, just a quiet cascade of systemic resignations. Airspace closed. Communication relays refused non-Terran syntax. Fuel regulation AIs recalibrated, slowly bleeding supply lines dry with no explosion, no sabotage, only procedure. Clause 9 wasn't an act of retaliation, it was the end of assumption, and across the Empire, the people finally understood what it meant to weaponize trust. By the time their hands reached for power again, the systems had already closed the doors. "I will speak," Varos said, jaw set against the tremor in his voice. The chamber of the neutral axis unfurled before him like a sanctum of consequence, half lit by filtered starscape, the other half obscured by the soft glow of treaty texts, scrolling slowly across the curved dome ceiling. At the chamber's center, raised slightly above the marbled floor, stood Ormek Halrud, speaker of the Axis, and now unwilling judge of history. A silence longer than diplomacy itself wrapped around the space. It wasn't silence bred from awe or respect, but one carved by dread, the kind that settled in bones rather than ears. Halrud's voice broke it without force. "You may proceed, Emperor Varos." Of Xantheran. Varos stepped forward onto the polished platform. His boots, once lined in gold, scraped against the stone, unshined, dulled by days spent inside a dying palace. His imperial regalia hung from his shoulders like an afterthought. Around him, counselors from 70 systems watched, some with curiosity, others with barely veiled scorn. "I come not to defend what cannot be excused," Varos began. "The attack on Earth's surface was an action made under false understanding. We believed their silence was abandonment. We believed they no longer wielded weight. Belief does not supersede agreement," Halrud replied, tone dry, almost rehearsed. "You signed the Treaty of Terrestrial Sovereignty. You endorsed the peace accords of the Outer Rings. You ratified the lexicon of interdependency, all of which Earth authored." Varos's lips thinned. "I was not emperor when those were signed, and yet you ruled under their protections," Halrud countered. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The walls themselves responded, not with noise but color. The treaty index on the dome turned blue as Halrud spoke, highlighting the signatures of Earth's long-forgotten diplomats beside Xantheran crests. They glowed brighter as the offenses were named. Varos lifted his head, but his words faltered before forming. He scanned the observers. No support met his gaze, only analysis. the kind of judgment given to fossils. We acknowledge our error, he said, slower now, but Earth's retaliation. Halrud raised a hand. There was no retaliation. Varos stopped. There was enforcement, Halrud continued. Clause Anaik was not vengeance. It was protocol, bound by signature, enabled only by violation. The laser plasma display beside Halrud lit with the line that had seared itself into every communication relay across Xantherian space. You broke diplomacy. You broke the universe. Varos took a step back, visibly shaken. Another counselor stood, her voice sharp as glass. Your empire's trade lanes depended on Earth's frameworks. Your warships mapped their jumps with Terran star sequences. Your AI protocols were laced with Earth's legal scaffolding. And now you want to plead as if you were attacked. Varos opened his mouth, but the air dried his tongue. Halrud's gaze didn't waver. You entered the chamber of law with arrogance. You now stand in its wreckage. A mechanical pedestal slid forward. Upon it sat a treaty, original parchment, laminated beneath protective shielding, its language written in dual scripts, Xantherian dialect, and Earth's archival code. The ink shimmered, almost alive, its lettering held still by logic and consequence. Recite the clause in question, Halrud ordered. Varos hesitated. Recite it. The Emperor's hand hovered over the page. His voice, when it came, cracked at the corners. Should a signatory empire launch aggression upon Terran territories during a period of declared neutrality? He faltered. Halrud leaned forward. Continue. Varos swallowed. Then Earth reserves the right to revoke operational privileges across systems bearing Earth-integrated dependencies, until trust is restored through interstellar arbitration or collapse. A chill laced the room, not temperature, reality. Varos lowered his hand. I offer formal apology, in the name of the Empire. No longer an empire, murmured a voice from the back row. A second joined. Fragments can't apologize for the whole. Varos turned, the heat in his eyes failing to light. Then what do you require? Sanction? Surrender? Halrud tapped a terminal at his side. A series of planetary maps rotated onto the council walls. Xantherian colonies flickering with system shutdowns, transport stations looped in protocol denial, civic infrastructure reduced to treaty-safe mode. You misunderstand, Halrud said. This isn't a punishment, it is aftermath. Varos's shoulders drooped. Then what remains? The answer did not come from Halrud, it came from the far entrance, where footsteps echoed across the marble, sharp and deliberate. Tarek Vizin stepped into the chamber. The Earth envoy's presence weighted not by grandeur, but by finality. He wore no ornament, only a dark tunic and a silver band stitched with coordinates. Veritas Prime's location. Vizin approached the central dais, and spoke directly, not to Halrud, but to Varos. What remains, he said, is the truth. Varos stared at him. You engineered this. No, Vizin answered. You did, centuries ago in ink, recently, in fire. He turned toward the council. We buried our strength in systems, not swords, because we remembered. We always remembered. Silence followed, not tense, resigned. Then Halrud stood. This council finds Earth's execution of Clause 9 to be lawful, activated under agreed stipulations, and morally unopposed by precedent. A symbol above the chamber, Xantherian's crest, flickered, then burned red. Varos lowered to one knee. He did not speak again, and the treaty on the pedestal glowed softly in cold blue. Let this record reflect, Tarek Vizin said, as he stepped into the center of the chamber, that Earth did not return fire. His voice was low, not frail, not theatrical, but tethered to weight the room wasn't prepared for. Behind him, the treaty codex hovered in projected layers, text gently orbiting in quiet rotation. Its blue glow cast shadows across the floor like ripples cut into stone. The eyes of the Axis remained on him. Varos knelt in stillness, head bowed not out of reverence, but resignation. The silence in the chamber was total. Even the air carried caution. Vizin adjusted the control sphere at his side. A heads-up panel bloomed beside him, not with battle footage or tactical overlays, but a home recording, soft lighting. A small apartment, books on a corner shelf. The camera lens shifted as a child, barefoot, laughing, ran past. Another boy, older, tried to catch him with a blanket tied like a cape. A woman's voice off-screen called them for dinner. The screen froze. Behind them, Outside the window, light bloomed, white, unformed. The frame shattered mid-laughter. No explosion followed. No fire. Just stillness. Vision turned back to the chamber. They were in Veritas Prime when the Xantheran strike hit. No warning. No reason. No war declared. A demonstration, they called it. He reached into his coat pocket and drew out an object no larger than his palm. Scorched at one edge, fused by heat, it was barely recognizable. A toy, he said softly. Recovered from the crater, belonged to my youngest. He placed it gently on the platform beside the sphere. It's the only piece they ever found. No one moved. He allowed the weight of the object to remain, then spoke again, slower. For centuries, we prepared for the day our silence would be mistaken for absence, that treaties would become decorative, that those who once feared war would seek it again. He gestured to the codex behind him. Earth chose survival not through dominance, but design, not through strength, but structure. Clause 9 wasn't vengeance, it was an agreement, one the galaxy signed, one they forgot. We didn't. A new layer of the codex rotated into view, highlighting passages Earth had authored long before the outer colonies existed. Pages written, not in retaliation, but caution. Lines of code embedded into legal text, like thread into armor. Vision didn't pause for effect. He spoke as if recounting weather. We didn't poison systems. We built dependencies. We didn't strike supply lines. We authored their maps. We didn't sabotage governance. We hosted their frameworks. He looked down at the toy again. They broke diplomacy, and so we let diplomacy break them. Varos finally lifted his head. You could have retaliated with force, and become what you are, Vision asked. Varos flinched. We showed the galaxy something worse than war, Vision said. A mirror. He walked forward, stopping just before the council row. Empires built on conquest expect challenge. They plan for fleets. They train for fire. But what they cannot plan for, what they cannot fight, is a system that stops listening. He turned again, this time to Halarod. We didn't erase them. We reminded them they signed their erasure. Halarod nodded once. Tarek returned to the center of the chamber. Earth will not claim territory. We will not colonize collapse. We will repair what must be repaired, but we will never again extend our hands unguarded. Another screen flickered on, this time showing the neutral zones across 12 systems. Treaty seals glowing blue, communications resuming on channels Earth controlled, infrastructure stabilizing, but only where the clauses had not been broken. Vision stepped back. His final words were not shouted. They landed with the permanence of iron. Peace once broken cannot be forced into place again. He deactivated the display. The toy remained on the dais, unclaimed. Tarek Vision turned and walked from the chamber, leaving behind only silence and system law. They've cut power to the council core. The technician's voice barely carried above the hollow resonance of the now empty chamber. On the central display, once vibrant with territorial flows, the Xantheran Empire's map flickered, colors stuttering, borders breaking apart like old threads coming undone. Then it fractured entirely. System by system, segment by segment, each region blinked into grayscale, labeled only with a flashing annotation, autonomous, no central directive. In one corner of the display, a heads-up overlay slowly redrew itself, not with fire, not with borders, but with absence. The Empire had not fallen, it had disappeared. Ormek Halrud stood alone beneath the treaty dome. The council had long adjourned, their verdict etched into Axis memory cores and archived in neutral codices, but Halrud had stayed, not to gloat, not to judge, to witness. The moment history changed its handwriting, he activated the terminal beside him, initiating the final documentation stream. The system responded without ceremony. Entry 8.9.2.1, Post-Clause Nike Arbitration Log. He spoke calmly, without inflection. Today marks the formal dissolution of the Xantheran Central Authority. No fleet remains unified. No colony answers to a single crest. Civil infrastructure has entered localized governance protocols. Earth has offered no occupation, no demands, no retaliation. He paused. The quiet was not empty. It was enormous. Earth's Clause Nike execution has proven absolute. Every embedded legal clause performed within treaty scope. No weapon fired, no territory claimed, and yet an empire no longer stands. His eyes flicked to the codex display rotating beside the dais. A new page hovered above the archives, blank, untouched. It was not absence. It was invitation, he continued. In the wake of this event, Earth has proposed a foundational shift in intergalactic diplomacy, the Accord of Preventative Conduct. It suggests no ruling body, only systems of redundancy, designed not to defend borders, but agreements. He folded his hands behind his back, gazed distant now, and yet the galaxy did not witness a war. He lowered his voice. It witnessed a reckoning. The terminal sealed the entry. Far across the stars, in the ruins of the once imperial city of Draloth, scavengers picked through the remains of a collapsed supply depot. The machines didn't resist. They didn't speak. They had long since deactivated, triggered by revocations written in a dialect older than any soldier guarding them. Children played in the silence, their parents watching the skyline, not for attack, but for direction. A blank flag now flew above the crater, no crest, no allegiance, only space where meaning used to be. On the outskirts of Earth's orbital embassy ring, Tarek Vissen stood at the viewport, inside a private observatory chamber. Behind him, the Accord's draft treaty spun in faint arcs, words written in mirrored languages, drafted not in ambition, but restraint. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence now worked for them. Van Tyros entered, approaching quietly, holding a hard copy, a treaty scroll bound in silver thread. "It's ready," Tyros said. Vissen took the scroll but didn't unroll it. "And the Council? They've ratified the clause for defensive infrastructure memorialization. Earth's systems will remain decentralized but active, passive unless provoked." Vissen finally turned. "And the Xantheran fragments? Most have entered ceasefire talks with border systems. Some already petitioned for axis neutrality. And Varos?" Tyros hesitated. "No confirmed sightings, no broadcasts. Rumors say he was seen walking alone near the ash grove, on Vokra." Vissen offered no reaction. "Let him walk." He set the scroll on the desk, beside the melted toy. The room felt colder with it there, though no climate systems had shifted. Tyros looked toward it. "You never buried it." Vissen shook his head. "Some things aren't meant to be forgotten." The screen behind them lit an axis-wide dispatch, not from Earth, but the Council. A single message floated across planetary relays, translated in every galactic tongue. "Diplomacy, once broken, is not a door to force open. It is a wall that remembers." Tyros whispered. "We rewrote the battlefield." "No," Vissen answered. "We reminded them what war never touched." He tapped the command pad. The message sent, not a threat, not a warning, a record. In the Neutral Axis Archive Core, the old treaty clerk Drell Javer once mentored sat beside a new scribe, translating Clause Nike into training materials. His stylus moved slowly, each word weighed, not for fear, but reverence. He gestured to the blank codex page pinned above the archival dais. "Do you know why it's empty?" The young clerk shook his head. The old man smiled faintly. "Because the next clause isn't for Earth." "Who's it for then?" "The rest of them." And so the galaxy moved forward, not with parades, not with reconstruction, but with memory. Treaties were no longer inked without care. AI frameworks came with fail-safe audits. Diplomacy academies taught system law alongside military history. Children learned the story, not as conquest, but consequence. Across the shattered sectors once ruled by the Xantheran Empire, flags burned, codexes flickered. Old systems recompiled themselves under new voices. But Earth didn't crown itself. It didn't march. It didn't proclaim victory. It had already won, not with missiles nor steel, but with the one weapon they had buried deepest of all, understanding. And from the ashes of power, a new page turned.